In the last few lectures, we displayed an error message if the shopping list exceeded a certain number of items. The error message was a property attached to the controller instance, which itself is attached to the scope service. However, we displayed the error label at all times. If there was no error, we simply displayed an empty string next to the label. What we would really like to do is hide the entire containing div if there is no error message and show it if there is one. We have seen Angular directives like ngController, ngapp, ngRepeat. In this lecture, we'll take a look at another few directives called ngIf, ngShow, and ngHide. There's not much theory behind these directives, so let's go straight to the code and see how they work. Okay, we're back in our editor, and we're in the folder Lecture 23, which is located in Full Stack Course 5 Examples folder. And this is our shopping list app that we've seen before. And we have one controller here called shopping list controller, and we're using controller as syntax to have a label called list for it for the inside of the controller body. As you remember, when the user clicks on the Add Item button, if the items array inside the shopping list service exceeds a certain number of maximum items, it will throw an exception. Let's take a look at that code in app.js. So if we scroll down here to the list.addItem, you'll see that if this particular statement throws an exception, we're going to catch that error and we're going to assign list.errorMessage, and we'll assign the error message from that thrown error object to the error message on the list. So if we go back to index.html, you'll see that we're displaying the word error, the label error, and then displaying the message that is supposed to come back from the controller. As I said, what we'd really like to do is not show this whole div at all if there's no error message. Well, one way of doing it is to use the ngIf directive. The ngIf directive takes a condition as its value. If that condition is true, the entire div is shown. If that condition is false, evaluates to false, then AngularJS takes the entire div out of the DOM tree. In other words, it's as if this div does not exist in our HTML. Let's go ahead and save that and go to our browser. And we could see here, let's bring up the Chrome Developer Tools, and we'll go to Elements. Let's take a look to see if we could see that div in our HTML. So if we open that up, we could see here that instead of our div, right after the ordered list, we see the comment, the HTML comment called ngIf list error message. And you can see it's commented out. There is no div existing. And the reason there's no div existing is because list.error message evaluated to false. However, if we start adding, at this point, we'll just add some bunch of nonsense here. We'll start adding some items. And finally, when we add more than 5, you'll see that that div all of a sudden sprang up into action, and it's now part of the DOM, the document object model. You see the div here, you see the ngIf, and it's class error, and the error is something class that we assigned to it. As you could see, it's coming from styles.css, and that's why the color of our text is red. And you can see that the div showed up. However, there's a different way to hide this message. Let's go back to our code editor, and we'll go to the HTML template, and instead of the div with the ngIf, we'll go ahead and comment that out. And I have some pre-written code here, and we'll use that right there. And what we're using now is we're using ngShow. ngShow does exactly the same thing as ngIf does, except that it will not remove the div from the document object model. It will simply put special classes on it that Angular will know to have the div hidden. Let's save that and go back to our browser, and let's go ahead and put some bunch of nonsense in here and add 5 items. And when we take a look here, before we even added 5 items, we'll see that the div is here, except it has some ngHide on it as one of the classes, and that is why it is hidden. In fact, I'm sure if you look at ngHide here, you'll see it says display none, and that's why it's hidden. So as we keep adding the more and more items, add one more, you'll see that the ngHide class goes away from this div, and therefore it's now showing up in the browser. Now, the other directive is called ngHide, and as you could probably guess, it's the exact opposite of ngShow. The only difference between ngHide and ngShow is whether or not it's going to hide or show the element based on the true or false. ngShow will hide the element if the value assigned to it is false. ngHide will show the element if the value assigned to it is false, and vice versa. Let's go ahead and save that. And we could see here that we're putting a condition here, not list error message. In other words, we're going to hide it when list.error message is false. And since an empty string evaluates to false, that's when we're going to hide this whole div. Let's go back to our browser, and you could see, if we scroll down here, we could see that the div is still showing up here, and again we have ngHide already applied to this div, and that's because this evaluated to false. False reversed with an exclamation point becomes true, so ngHide is true, so it's hiding the div. So again, if we put some bunch of nonsense here and add 5 items, you'll see on the 6th item this ngHide class will get removed because list.error became true. The opposite of true is false, so therefore it's no longer hiding our div. So let's summarize. ngIf is a general purpose if statement-like attribute directive. If its value is false, Angular removes the containing element from the document object model entirely. ngShow and ngHide attribute directives automatically attach CSS classes to the containing element that either show or hide the element, depending obviously on their value. The containing element, however, does not get removed from the document object model. So if for some reason you still needed to manipulate that element while it's hidden, you can do that with ngShow and ngHide, but you would not be able to do that with ngIf, since when its value is false, the entire element gets taken out from the document object model.